Well, it's November the 6th, 2021, and I'm going to today go ahead and address the trial of Kyle Rittenhouse. We've discussed that before last year, sometime about over a year ago, when the instance that happened in terms of his arrest and charging. But so anyhow, and of course I'll make a few comments about the vote in the House of Representatives yesterday as well. But so at any rate, the trial of Kyle Rittenhouse has been on underway this week, and it's running quite a bit different than the the trial of the Minnesota police officer there, Derek Chauvin. Um, it seems like this judge is a little more loosey-goosey in the way he handles the court. Isn't excusing the jury when they have various arguments from the lawyers and so forth. But the basic theme so far seems to be that the prosecution witnesses are making a pretty good case for the defense, which is one of the kind of amazing things about this case. Most of the focus has been on the shooting of Joseph Rosenbaum in front of a store called Car Source, and anyhow, so essentially he's been charged with the homicide of two individuals, Joseph Rosenbaum and another guy later on while he was running away, and wounding of another. And so the situation so far, though, is kind of looking fairly favorable. It's interesting that there's also a couple other charges of reckless endangerment, basically for people who were close to having bullets that flew by them while they were shooting at the three people he shot. No actual innocent person was hurt, but they've created some charges out of that. But it's kind of interesting how this goes down in the trial. Is one of the witnesses was I think he's a kind of a reporter for the Daily Caller, I believe, who was there and witnessed the shooting of Joseph Rosenbaum. Apparently, he describes the fact that this Rosenbaum character had basically charged at Kyle Rittenhouse, and there were some previous altercations with this individual. So essentially, it was sort of like there's a previous time in which this guy had said to him, if basically that if we see you again, if I see you again, I'm going to effing kill you, basically. So this guy had made threats previously. Now he's also, it appears he also has mental problems, and was recently let out of some kind of care the day before this or something to that effect. I'm going to get the facts on that. It will come out later in the trial, I guess. But it's also, there's some witnesses have already testified that that basically the other protesters were very didn't get along well with him. He was a very abusive individual and very hard to get along with, and kind of ran around with himself by himself and a couple of other individuals. By the way, if you like these videos, remember to please give me a like. It helps with the algorithm. If you haven't subscribed already, you can subscribe, and of course, always ring the bell for notifications if you're interested in that. But so I'll get on with this. So it's interesting that one of the witnesses that they brought in was, and I'm getting all this off. I watch these Robert Ruler videos, Watching the Watchers, and I can condense down at least a brief synopsis of what was in there. The whole thing would take literally hours to watch, which I spent some time watching it recently, so to kind of get the idea of what's happening here. And I've also read a few other things, but we've got to put this together. But he puts excerpts of the trial, and you kind of see what's happening. And it's just kind of interesting where you have the prosecutor bringing up a witness and then trying to impeach the witness when the witness doesn't say what the prosecutor wants them to say. Because usually they have this all worked out ahead of time and they know what they're going to say. One of the witnesses was his own best friend, and we do learn a few more things about why he was involved in it. Apparently, his family had some, even though they were currently living in very northern Illinois, have some strong connections to Kenosha, and so that's kind of why he was there. And his friend, I guess, lives in that area. And it appears that the friend was involved with buying him the AR-15 that was used in this case. And there's a bit of a controversy as to why he had it there, but apparently because of all the rioting, his friend's father got the guns out of the safe that they had, and apparently Kyle just picked his up and took it with him when he went down to the area where the rioting was, and was involved in his own effort to try to help protect some of the businesses. Interesting enough, he isn't there alone doing this. There's several other armed individuals there also that are involved in this same kind of effort. As far as I can see, they're not really members of any kind of, quote, militia, unquote. It's more like just a group that kind of formed because of the riot that was ongoing. And so anyhow, but this also, so this Rosenbaum guy apparently is primarily interested in setting fires all around the place. That's his principal activity. And anyhow, the prosecutor is trying to make a case that somehow that Rittenhouse was sort of chasing him before the altercation, but it also is pretty clear that the final engagement, Rosenberg kind of went after Rittenhouse and was lunging at him, apparently saying something to the effect that he was going to take the gun away from him. And that's where there's kind of a swerving motion on Rittenhouse's part, and then he fires 4 shots, I believe, and kills Rosenberg. But the thing is that the prosecutor is trying to claim that he was falling before the shots were fired, and this witness doesn't say that. He's basically saying he was looked like he was coming down because he was lunging to get a hold of his gun, and then the shots were fired. And that's one of the points where again the prosecutor is trying to impeach his own witness, because none of the witnesses so far are defense witnesses. And so the assessment seems to be that the prosecution is kind of losing the case, unless, of course, the jury is totally prejudiced against Rittenhouse, which we're not sure about. I mean, there are people from the area, and I don't think it has quite the level of tension and fear and hardcore leftism you had in Minneapolis, nor do you have an 8 or 9 minute tape of somebody with their knee on somebody's neck and calling for their mother. So I think this one will go down quite a bit different. There are some issues about honesty that have been brought up, and one of the witnesses that they tried to impeach basically because he gave a different name to reporters that apparently had tried to interview him, and he didn't want to give out his real name because I guess he was afraid that somebody might show up to his house and pay him a visit there, in a very unfriendly way given the riot conditions. But I think that's, that wasn't under oath or anything like that, and it wasn't to a law enforcement person or a trial. So I think that's kind of, it's like the prosecutor's just grasping. One might actually believe that the charges were filed in the George Floyd atmosphere, particularly after the Jacob Blake shooting, which occurred earlier and set off the whole riot. So, that may have been the motivation, and maybe when they got into the case and looked at all the facts, it kind of came out that not a very good case. So they're doing the best they can. Like I say, unless they have a jury that's biased in favor of prosecution here, it looks to me like most of the charges are going to go down. The one that might still stick is the weapons charge, because apparently he was 17, and one could argue he didn't have they have a law that you're supposed to be 18, I guess. Although there is another law that's really meant for hunting that might give them some mitigation, but that really hasn't come up yet. So I don't know what they'll do about that. I believe that's a misdemeanor, though. So at any rate, considering what he's being charged with otherwise, the misdemeanor probably won't be a big impediment to his life or whatever. So that's kind of the way it's going. We'll just have to see what happens next. I guess the latest thing today was the interview of the owners of Car Source, and And basically they're claiming that where Rittenhouse had claimed that they asked him to protect their business, they're now kind of saying, no, we didn't. And then the defense attorneys uh, basically in the cross-examination raised the issue, are you basically saying this because you're afraid you'll be sued if you admit that you really asked for them to do it? Because remember, people were shot, so theoretically that could be the beginning of a lawsuit where, of course, the standard of proof is a lot lower than in a criminal case. So, at any rate, that's kind of the way it stands right now. It looks to me like it's not going that well for the prosecution, because after all, it doesn't look like the witnesses the prosecution have are really very helpful. Anyway, so I'll try to keep you updated on it, but I thought this would be kind of an interesting topic to hit that's in the news and something other than the political stuff I've been focused on mostly. Okay, but I will, speaking of the political stuff, we finally have had the vote in the Senate on the infrastructure bill, the $1.2 trillion roads, bridges, and broadband, and probably a few other items bill. And it passed with 215 Democrat votes, and I forget the exact number. I guess it would be, I remember, it's I think 13 Republican votes. So it is true, I think 6 Democrats, I believe, voted against it. So it is true if some Republicans had to support it, it wouldn't have passed. However, I tend to think that that it's probably a good thing it's out of the way, because this is what has been holding up the whole process up to now. It has been the fact that the hardcore progressives, or as I call them, the neo-Marxists, they want to use that as a leverage, because there's a strong majority of members of the Senate, at least, 69, I think it is, members, including 19 Republicans, are for this bill. And one might even tend to believe that some of the other Republicans are not really that much against it, but they don't want to vote for it because it's big spending, and you know how that goes. And so there's only it's interesting, more senators actually voted for it than representatives in the House. Of course, the senators may feel more entrenched in their position, I think, where the House people always are more vulnerable facing election every 2 years, But the key thing, I think, is now the progressives don't really have anything to hold over the heads of the moderates in the Senate at all, or the moderates in the House. I guess they've kind of given a tacit agreement that they're willing to vote on the bill, at least on the House side. But when it gets to the Senate side and reconciliation, they have what's called the vote-a-rama, where everybody can put up these amendments, and if one Democrat votes for them and every Republican votes for them, it will become part of the bill. So who knows what the bill will turn into when it gets to the Senate side. And I think the pressure, the leverage the House has is really diminished tremendously with the passing of the reconciliation bill. Because remember, all 50 Democrat senators want that bill, but they don't necessarily all want all the details in this social program bill. And finally, remember that while they're officially saying it's a $1.85 trillion bill or something like that, it hasn't been officially scored. And if you score it, with assuming the programs, go for the whole 10 years, rather than artificial terminations of things like only, I think, 6 years for universal pre-K. Does anybody believe that pre-K will operate for 6 years and then terminate? Does anybody believe that if it gets started? I don't think so. And there's other things like that too. So basically, what it comes down to is that it would be almost a $4 trillion bill, according to some estimates, although not official scoring, if in fact it was spread out for the whole 10 years. Now, it could be that certain programs in there would terminate, but nothing like the ones I just mentioned. So anyhow, we'll have to see where that goes from here, but I just want to kind of give you an update on that and what I think about it. So I think that this will actually take the pressure off for the big, massive spending bill, coupled with the fact that the recent Republican electric victories in Virginia and elsewhere. I think what the prosecuting attorney in Seattle, the Republican beat the Democrat there. They nearly won the governorship of New Jersey, and that's still being contested, although probably the Democrat will still get it, like I kind of thought in the last video, because of how close it was. And the inherent Democrat advantages in a somewhat corrupt system, right? But so we'll see how that turns out. And there's other instances where school board elections went against the Democrats and the far left. So I think that it's a kind of a bit of a shock to the Democrats, and I tend to think that will strengthen now that the infrastructure bill's out of the way. I think it'll strengthen their resistance. But anyway, I'll close this for now. My links to my social media are below. Not exactly a link, but I've got the addresses. As I said before, I put a link in, but I tend to think the link isn't necessarily the best way to approach it, maybe. But anyhow, at any rate, I'll close this for now, and until next time.